Good afternoon, everybody. I'm Parimal Pandit, and I'm going to present on 12 senses and trauma today. I'm a practicing clinical psychologist and an anthroposophic psychotherapist from Chennai. Now, when we look at senses, we use this word in many forms. We use it as a noun, we use it as a verb, we use it to convey something very physical and as well uh, something that is completely at a soul feeling level or at an intuitive level. I sense something going wrong, or I sense something is really nasty. So these are the uses for the word sense and the verb sense, which give it a multidimensional layer to this. Now, Cambridge Dictionary defines the noun sense as an ability to understand, value, or react to something, especially from any of the five physical abilities to see, hear, smell, taste, and touch or feel. For example, you may say, you had a good sense to reach in time. So it's a creating awareness. It's like denoting awareness. The other way that we use the noun sense is body power to convey a sensation or perception which is produced through the organs of touch, scent, taste, smell, or any other sensory organs, or resulting from a particular condition of part of the body. For example, I sense tightness in the throat. The sense is the sense of tightness. Feeling, a feeling about something. I can sense anger or something is going wrong. The other way that we use the noun sense is also in relation to judgment. It makes a good sense to buy the property now. So you see, there is a plethora of meaning or connotations to the noun sense. Now, if you look at the verb, it is when we use it as a verb, it's to feel or to be aware of something. And what are we aware of? We are aware of the sensations, the physical process of responding to the stimuli and providing data for perception. Now, the sensing, which happens through various sense organs, mostly the five prominent ones that are the external senses: sight, taste, hearing, smell, touch, which has the corresponding systems of visual, auditory, gustatory, auditory, olfactory, and tactile. There are also systems which regulate our internal feelings, like the vestibular, the sense of balance, or proprioception, which gives us, or a kinesthetic, which is related to the information on the movement and related positions of the parts of the body. There is also a sense of pain which we get, or when we feel hunger or thirst. All these processes, bodily processes, there are different sensory systems which alert us to that. Now, how does this sensory processing happen? So there is a signal from the environment around, a sensory a sensation or a sensory signal which enters or is collected in the organs, sensory organs connected to that input. And then that organ transducts the sensory information to the central nervous system of the brain. And that's where it is given, it leads to more perceptions and also to interpretations of the stimuli which have entered and been transferred to this uh, central nervous system. And on the basis of that, we decide whether there is an internal or an outer external action or reaction to the sensory stimuli. In the CNS is where there is a decision taken to understand where how is that stimuli? What is that stimuli? Whether it's danger, whether it's we need to take an action about it, or whether it's simply an awareness. And so sometimes there is an action generated, sometimes there is a feeling generated out of it. Now, are we merely recipients of these sensations? Now, where does the individuality of sensing a sensory input, processing it, and giving it a meaning and acting upon it, where at what stage the individuality of the person manifests, and who is that in us, which member of the human being is responsible for this? Now, Anthroposophy, which looks at a human being as a spiritual human being, a spiritual being who he or she uh, has been incarnated onto the earth to complete certain tasks of the previous life. So there is a past and a present and a future for the incarnating soul. And this knowledge that there is a continuity, the knowledge that there is something that is inhabiting this physical body, which is greater than the physical body, which acts as the I, the ego, which perceives, which decides which stimuli to let enter, how to process it, and what action is needed to be taken. Gary Gustav, he's the one who said that as you become multisensory, you begin to see yourself as a soul first and a personality second. You begin to experience yourself as more than a body and more than a mind, and the circumstances around you as a meaningful and design for your spiritual growth. So whatever you sense through the sense organs, the sensory expressions, experiences and impressions are used or are converted for your spiritual growth. So the sense impressions are something that are collected or are received by the nerve sense system in the human being, which carries the sensations which are received from the external world or from internal body, and the I of the individual experiences itself through this sensory impression. So, how does the ego of the individual experience itself? It experiences itself that this is cold, this is warm, I don't like this sound is overbearing. These experiences are given to the ego organization by through this through the senses, and that's the physical body. Now, soul receiving these sensory impressions stores them in the memory. The first is the temporary memory, working memory, and then it goes to the long term memory later to be used. This memory helps us to retain the connection between the past, present, and the future. This is the ego which works or makes sense of the memories and retrieves them at whenever we require it. But when they are not completely sunk, then that's the time they surface without our consciousness, without our knowledge to the consciousness. Rudolf Steiner talks about 12 senses. He gave many lectures between 1916 and 24 to tell us about why he thinks there are 12 senses. And when you hear it, you will see the practicality of having these 12 senses. He not only says that there are 12, but he also gives layers to these 12 senses. So the lower senses, the middle senses, and the higher senses. So the lower senses, they allow us to experience the nature of our own body and the consciousness of our bodily existence. The lower senses are touch, life sense, sense of self movement, and it is also sense of balance. It is these lower senses, these lower senses are also basis to build the middle and the higher senses. So the middle senses are the senses of smell, taste, vision, and warmth. These give us an experience of the world around us. It reveals the body of the surrounding to us. And these give us the ego experience, the I experiences, the soul human beings, the feelings. These are called also the feeling senses, which give us the perception of different feelings. I like it, I don't like it. It makes me feel happy, it makes me feel angry. All of that are mostly connected to the middle senses. The higher senses give us the opportunity to relate to other beings around us. These are the social senses or the human senses, and it allows us to grasp the essence behind the appearance of the other thing, the things around us. These human senses allow us to perceive human qualities which are present in things around us. And Takers, who is a pioneer in anthroposophic psychotherapy, talks about it in his book, A Psychology of Human Dignity. These higher senses gives the ego experience of the spiritual human being. So man as a physical human being, man as a soul human being, and man as a spiritual human being who is connected to this world through our physical body. Now, let's have a brief look at what are these lower senses. The sense of touch, we perceive the boundaries of our body through the sense of touch. Skin is the organ for the perception. The differentiation of sensations when we touch different things in nature is possible because of sense of touch. This gives us a sense of holding security within our own body. And it is a sense of dull consciousness. We are not constantly aware of it. Sense of life. This sense allows us to perceive our general physical condition, wellness, health, and vitality. This we experience ourselves as physical self occupying the physical space. So within the physical body, the sense of touch, we experience the sense of life. Sense of self movement. The sense of self movement perceives the position of our body parts in the movement. That is called proprioception. Using mirror neurons, the movement of the other people are also imitated internally. The sense of movement gives us a possibility of freedom. When we feel stuck, we feel unfree. The organ is the motor nerve system from the spine and central part of the brain. The sense of balance. The sense of balance tells the soul the position of the body with regard to the surrounding and the spatial relationship of oneself with the outside world. If any one of you are car sick or seasick, you will know how it feels when we lose the sense of balance. Whenever we are when you're not able to retain the uprightness and constantly feel giddy, that's what is the sense of balance. It tells us what all our body can do, and it gives it gives the man the ability to stand as an upright species on the earth. This is through this sense of balance we are able to stand and retain this position against the gravity. According to Steiner, it's a sense of inner peace. When we lose balance in our life, we lose the inner peace in our life. Now, the middle senses. The sense of smell conveys an odor of the substances around us, usually the dead matter smells. So the smell is connected to the matter, the physical or the matter. In sense of smell, we are powerless to have control. It pervades us having without us having any say in it. Air is the carrier of the sense of smell. And inner nature of the matter is revealed to us through this sense. Whether this is ripe, this has gone bad, this needs more time to ripe. All of that we understand through this sense of smell. It's connected to the memories and feelings. We always smell the summer, we smell the winters, we smell different festivals in the air. So it is connected, and certain smells make us remind us of our childhood, or sometimes remind us of many of the beautiful things in our life. This sense is a spiritual way connected to sensing rottenness around us, or something that's not yet right. It gives us, it makes us think, and we use it also metaphorically. For example, I sense something fishy, or I sense something is cooking. This is a sense of smell. Now, sense of taste, it's the most active taste. It's more active than the sense of smell, and we have control over us. It tells us about the constitution, what is made, what has gone into the constitution of the substance, almost like a temperament. It's influenced by and enhanced by the rituals and the cultural nuances of the place. This is a transformed sense of life. Sense of sight. Now, with the sense of sight, we are able to perceive the shapes and color of the world around us. It displays space and it's contained around us. My eye, the ego, goes out to meet the object in the sense of sight. It almost grasps the object, and hence it's the transformed sense of movement. Sense of warmth, it's an ability to perceive the temperature of the surroundings. It's also connected to the psychological warmth we receive from our surroundings. We often use it to say, oh, this reception was really cold, isn't it? So there are nuances to these senses, generate certain amount of feelings through them. Now the higher senses are the human senses. Sense of hearing, it opens the world of sounds and tones to us. An inner nature of things or people is revealed to us through the sense of hearing or listening. And we listen not only to the sounds and tones, but we also listen to the meaning of it and what does it convey. So in psychotherapy and counseling, it's an immensely important sense where we are trying to see what lays behind the words, what the client is saying or using. It's an open sense and which allows the world to resonate or reverberate within us. Sense of speech or word. This sense enables us to categorize sounds and units and differentiates between sounds and speech with syllables. How we form words reveals what we hear and what we imitate. This language is another area where the culture and topography of human life, human soul is revealed. A sense of thought. The sense of thought makes it possible for us to form concepts and meaning to the words, allows us to understand the significance of symbolic content. Sense of I. The perception of the other person's I or ego and not our own is the function of the sense of I. Revealing who the other is or perceived who the other is the main function of this sense. In the language of psychology, we may call it empathy, or the ability to empathize is the sense of I. It offers us the possibility to perceive the innermost essence of the other's individuality, which is very important in psychotherapy. So, this is how the senses are transformed and become the lower senses, are who make it possible for the higher senses to develop. Now, the lower senses are mostly should be nurtured and developed during the early childhood, 0 to 7. And if they're well nurtured and well developed, we are able to perceive the have a good relationship to the body and able to evaluate our inner senses very well. The If there is disruption, obviously there are body image issues, attachment issues, and depression. The middle senses they are ready and need to be nurtured in the mid childhood, that is around 7 to 14. Through this enrichment of these allows us the colorful tapestry of our soul's inner life. It gives us this richness to the inner life, ability to see the beauty in the outside world. If lacking, it can create violence, insensitivity, lack of connect to the harmony and beauty and coldness. Adolescence, this higher senses, we are ready to develop the higher senses during the adolescence. And these are, if they're well nurtured and developed through pedagogy, through education, there is always that a person will become well rounded, well matured, socially balanced personality, able to think, speak, and listen individually and independently. If it's disrupted, then there is a lack of sense of self and of others, imbalance in personality, disconnected and incoherent speech and thought, and inability to express oneself or understand others. Now, how do these senses work? Each of the sense contributes something specific to the building of the eye. The lower senses are directly related to building of the higher senses. The middle senses mediate the development. Every sense has in itself intricately woven all the senses, and that makes it a bit complex situation for us. The lower senses are the ones which get built during the first 7 years of life, like I said before. And they are the senses which are mostly unconscious senses. The other two senses, which are also unconscious and which can be called the night senses, are the sense of smell and taste, while the sense of sight and warmth and the higher senses are the day senses or the more conscious senses. We are more aware of them or are easily accessible to us. At night, when we sleep, is the time when the senses are they come together. Almost they whatever we have here on the earth, the sensory experiences during our sleep meets the spiritual world, and they have a little meeting. And in that meeting, the sensory integration happens. And through that integration, when we wake up in the morning, there is something new which is being born as a capacity, as an inclination, as an intention or a feeling to lead the day. So it's very important how we take in the senses in the day and how we take them at night very consciously. That conscious work help us to integrate whatever has come through the day to us in our sensory life. Now, how are these connected to trauma? Of course, we all know that in trauma, these senses are completely dispersed and some more than the others. There are many types of traumas, and different traumas and the intensity of trauma creates different kinds of experiences. This trauma typically involves wounding of more than one senses, and trauma can be serious trauma like abuse or rape or shooting, leading to disorders of PTSD, which are classified under DSM-5, or it can be a smaller ongoing stressful situations which become traumatic, like growing up with the conflicts in the house, abuse in the house, or constantly living in poverty or struggling of day to day life, these can become a long term, uh, smaller disruptions, but they are traumatic nevertheless. The assault on the lower senses actually is the tear in the fundamental sense of owning one's own body. So when there is a there are assault on sense of touch, life, movement, or balance through this any of the traumas, you can see that it creates disruption in the owning of one's own body. The imprints are stored in all the sensory areas in the form of dull memories which refuse to sink into unconscious. Our brain, especially the amygdala, stops processing and focuses all of its energy on getting you away from the danger. The memory doesn't get fully processed and is fragmented in the brain in chunks of implicit and explicit memories. Similarly, the smell, touch, or sound can trigger the panic, flight, or fight reaction because they are the most sensitive areas where the memories just are not yet fully processed upon. They are just hanging there and get triggered at the smallest of the opportunity. The bodies are it it the bod when there is trauma, when you are in the traumatic situation, the body shuts down every other um expenditure and spends everything on saving you from that danger, perceived danger. So it's fight, flight, freeze, whatever it is, it's all encompasses that. And that's where the the memories get frozen at that point in that section. This actually has been well established and researched throughout this trauma, where they have studied extensively the war veterans who came back with PTSD or long term domestic trauma abuse or rape victims and victims of war or famine or any of the natural disasters. There is always these memories are encoded in the body, in the brain, in the sensory areas. Now, all the disturbances in the lower senses, they are they create a sense of helplessness and homelessness, because I don't own my body. This body doesn't seem mine. It seems to belong to something else. A sense of shattering of their home and hence their biography is experienced by the individuals undergoing trauma. The more intense the trauma, the deeply scarred and disintegrated the senses become. One major sign of trauma is that of hypervigilance and hence constant activation of autonomous nervous system. The body is not at rest, which is disturbance causes the disturbance in sense of life, which is connected to the autonomous nervous system. It's worked through the autonomous nervous system, and the parasympathetic and sympathetic nervous system keep getting compromised because of this fear and anxiety, which is part of the trauma experience. There's jumpiness, disturbances of movement, and either numbness or feeling stuck with fear. This is a lack of sense of self movement, and this creates a lack of peace and balance in the individual. Middle senses get overwhelmed as it becomes difficult for a person to digest those sensory impressions. It creates a situation where the person may misperceive the cues and respond by either panic, withdrawal, or aggression. For example, a certain smell can trigger memories of assault or trauma, resulting in any of the above reactions. In these cases, the higher senses seem dispersed and not available for the ego or the I to, to be present and deal with the situation. Later on, this effect stays as one is stuck in the loop, unable to leave the trauma and leave their own biography in the present times. Although the reaction to trauma originates in the body, it carries on in the soul in the form of loss of interest, inability to move on with life, or living with futility. So all the three sense levels or layers are affected, and they bring our whole living mechanism to a standstill, or constantly stuck in the loop of overreaction or underreaction. Now, how do we work with this? So, in the therapy, when we are working with trauma, the first and the foremost work is to bring some sense, some semblance of restoration of the sensory dispersion. Trauma exposes the person to untruthfulness of the world around it. It kind of creates grooves in the sense of goodness, beauty, and truth around us, which anchor us in the current phase of our life. Restoration of senses and creating safe physical vessel for the spirit is the therapy for trauma. Working with rhythms of the day, establishing a sound rhythm which gives anchor for the eye to feel its own body, and bringing the life forces to enlive in the body helps in unplugging and streamlining the struck or broken vitality. This is done by the therapist involving the clients on working with the body, maybe through breathing exercises, through scheduling, doing activity scheduling for the clients, asking them to start one activity in the day which they prefer and which kind of calls them. I usually start working with asking them to do one activity for the body, like doing some exercises or cooking or something. One for the soul, so it can be listening to music, it can be listening to doing gardening or painting or crochet or anything that gives them a solace. And the third is something for the spirit. So, where your thoughts are enlivened, or you are expressing something, you're working on poetry, or you are listening to certain beautiful discourses, reading something interesting. These three things actually bring them in alignment with the present world and helps them to get move from the unsafe traumatic experience to the safe grounding of today in their current life. This bringing the quality of, there is also a possibility of establishing a Socratic dialogue, which brings the clients from the amygdala, where they constantly and the limbic system, where they are constantly hypervigilant and reactive and living in panic, to a more prefrontal cortex of risk assessment, of planning, of looking at consequences, which allows them to feel in charge of their own environment, control their own environment, and not feel so helpless. By naming or expressing their trauma in words with, or metaphors, or through drawing, which I call naming the beast, because that helps them to externalize it, to get it out of their body and look at it slowly, very slowly, and make it non threatening, and establish a link again to the present biography, which is extremely needed. Because these undigested sensory impressions from the trauma keep pushing up in the memory, and these creates a lot of instability. There are various models of therapy which work, like EMDR, eye movement desensitization, or desensitization reprocessing, body embodiment therapy, or mentalization therapies, mindfulness, which are also talk about the same thing. The only difference here is we are trying to bring trauma, um, which is embedded in these senses, and using these senses as anchors to bring the lost spirituality to the individual who has lost hope and trust in this life, which has been completely shattered. This is this is a very important step, because to using the capacity to reflect, the client takes the sensory experience consciously, looks at it, takes it in his nightlife, works on it, and is able to arrive at a new intention, conclusion, or a decision to overcome the trauma. It is very important how we as therapists are available in our own higher senses to the clients, working constantly on our listening, speech, sense of thought, and sense of ego or I is very important to hold the atmosphere in the therapy. Having a certain peaceful and harmonious surrounding in the therapy room is important. Having certain objects which the client can hold when they're talking about these painful memories, like the silk scarves, the bean bags or stones, or having a lot of plants in the therapy room, help the clients to feel grounded in this physical setting to reach into their trauma and slowly heal their wounds. So, this is what I wanted to say about the 12 senses, and see how these working can release them from this grip of the traumatic experience and be present and live their biography on the earth. Thank you.